Take us away, Jason.
Yeah, so thanks for coming, everybody. We have a pretty simple agenda for today, but hopefully we'll have some good discussion about a couple of things. So just to lead off with where we are in terms of proposals in the pipeline, KIP 23, that's Matt's discretionary investment authority, that went to a vote this morning and we'll be voting through Saturday morning. So if you haven't, please vote. And once, as usual, or as is our new usual, this is open to Rook and ex-Rook holders as well. And we'll circle back to that in a second. In preparation, we have AlCap's proposal for continuing to boost the Rook staking yield. PyShow did respond to that, I think, yesterday morning, saying that he's going to dig up some of the data that we were saying we needed. So he said he was going to work on that this week. So we'll look forward to hearing about that. I know Matt is working on the strategic use of ETH for yield generation proposal. We were talking about that earlier today, so that'll probably go online in the next day or two. And then finally, Treasury Management Framework is also in progress. So that is where those are. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about these? I think we've talked about them a fair amount. All right, good. Well, then let's move on to process discussion. So just to, excuse me, recap on last week, we talked about voting rights and talked about how XRook should be weighted, and had a small poll that I need to do more to publicize, but that's up on the new governance section of the forum. And in case people haven't seen it, I made a new section on the forum that's for discussion of governance issues that come up that is outside of the scope of individual KIPs. So hopefully we'll have more to post there in the days to come. But at the moment, there's just a discussion of this Rook and ex-Rook weighting issue and a small poll. And in terms of that, something that came up in a conversation with Tommy earlier today that I thought it would be interesting to talk here about. Some people have said in the past that maybe there should be some way to link people who stake Rook on our platform and do something to link that to governance and to voting. And so one of the ways we might think about that is giving them extra voting power, which it seems like weighting X-Rook by their actual Rook exposure, so one X-Rook counts for more than one Rook, is implicitly something that we're going to do that. But another way to think about it is we are giving people yield for staking, which is not something that really benefits the protocol. So another way to think about that, it would be to perhaps develop a way where people who stake are expected to vote, and they're expected to participate in governance as one of the conditions for getting the large yields they're getting from staking. So I actually just wanted to open the floor with that and see what people thought about that. This is not a formal proposal. This is just tossing an idea around.
I would say one bit of feedback that we've heard constantly is that just holding the token is very important. And so trying to think about it, how that factors in, because, if there's differing opinions where, some people say that just holding or just staking the token is beneficial for the protocol, and someone else saying the other way. I think that kind of is a linchpin on what what drives decision making going forward.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, I definitely get the sense that there are parties on both sides where people would feel very strongly that holding it is really important, but there are also people who want to use the revenues for things that help the protocol.
I think in any way, if someone actually contributes through participating in governance, they should receive more of the benefits than holding.
Well, what you could do is much like, say, what Tokamak does or what Convex does or whatever, is that the staking rewards that are accrued are unlockable by participating in governance, while they have weekly or biweekly governance that drives that participation and therefore a regular source of yield. For us, I don't exactly know what frequent participation would look like here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard because you can't just go by voting, because we don't need more voters. We need like more educated voters, right? And if someone would just, I don't know.
We also don't have like a million proposals to throw up all the time, and
Right.
I wouldn't even say it's that. What that does is it incentivizes people to just write proposals, so there's something to vote on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's how the proper form of governance needs to be driven. Now, say if there was something that we wanted to do weekly, like say we would tune specific parts of the protocol weekly, or that we would allocate assets or votes or something, and having participation in that is how you earn it. Like there are things that we could either create or piggyback off of that would create frequent participation in decisions. Things like the CVX voting, things like what we're going to do with Tokamak. So,
What about we have
what was that, Tommy?
if we have like a certain budget for governance participation, and then like every month or so through coordinate, like the community or whoever can just vote on distributing that amount of Rook or money over, and maybe you can take that out of the yield we're getting from the treasury, for instance, and then distribute that over this group of people. Is that something we can consider?
So what you're saying is that we discontinue the staking rewards part of our tokenomics and supplement it with a new thing that's from the treasury?
No, I think at this point, all I'm saying is that instead of having like 100%, for instance, go to, let's say, passive stakers, we can at least take a part of that and then fairly redistribute that to people that actually contribute to governance, right? To community members.
Okay, so like there's a baseline for just passive staking, and then the some X percent is earned by participation.
Yeah, or yeah, something like that. I mean, the details we can work on, but I'm just trying to think of ways to reward people or incentivize people from meaningfully contributing through, I guess, the DAO instead of just putting their coins in a smart contract and not doing anything. Because like there's opportunity cost there. We could use that money to go to business, right? Or like to go to protocol, for biz dev purposes, marketing, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it also seems like that could dovetail with some of the discussions going on around what to do for the community and how to draw the community in and how to reward people for participation. But I like the idea of keeping some sort of baseline just that you get for staking and then adding something more for participation in whatever form.
Yeah. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any staking rewards or anything. I'm just saying that right now there really isn't an incentive for people to contribute to the DAO, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and there's so much money going to the stakers that why can't we take like a part of that and then even have the community redistribute that based on who they think was most valuable in terms of like coming up with KIPs or I don't know, in any way like helping governance or community initiatives or whatever.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's worth thinking about more. Okay. Well, we'll come back to that. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was about I guess the other end of the governance process, which is the starting point. So what kinds of, what's scope of governance sounds like a really boring and anodyne statement, but it's sort of, where does governance start and where does it stop? So what kinds of things go through the process, and are there things we could do on the front end to make that smoother and help articulate what it is that we want to see in proposals, because we have such variety in proposals and we have a nice template that sort of gets at the basic components of it, but it does seem like an investment proposal should look maybe different than a partnership proposal, should look different than a meta proposal about the governance process itself. Right. And so if you've got different things that are going on, and I'm inspired here a lot by looking at Optimism's approach to this, where they articulate very clearly, here are, I can't remember, 5 or 6 different kinds of proposals. Here are the criteria for each. This is the quorum requirement, not that we have or should have that, but they go through and sort of, they've pre-identified the things that will go through governance and what they should be and what those proposals should look like. So it struck me that would be a good conversation to have in this forum, so that we can start clarifying those as we work on the process itself. Because the next stages of what we're talking about here, we'll start getting into the SOFONs and the decision making. But if we can clarify for the moment what the front end looks like, then I think that can help that a lot. I would also say we've had conversations about this in a couple of dimensions. So some people have mentioned this idea that proposals that would control various kinds of functions would be the kind of variation to think about. Other people have talked about the need for different kinds of proposals in terms of the level of review. So for example, if something's already been approved and you want to tweak one little parameter, maybe that can have an expedited kind of proposal. So what, I have a question, and Kyle, I'm really glad you're here, because it's a sort of a biz dev question, I guess. Like, what, if we think about proposals, would it be worth considering integrations as their own kind of proposal? Or should they be folded under Treasury, or where would those go? Because I feel like the ones that are about, the budget process or things having to do with governance itself are pretty straightforward, but there are areas where whether something is about the protocol or about a product or about Treasury, those seem to overlap by a lot.
Yeah, I would probably consider like integrations and say research grants, like what the TWAM guys are doing, kind of in the same bucket, where you're going to need probably some form of a technical explanation of what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need to talk about the resources required, whether that is monetary or that is man hours. So I think that so I mean, if it's something that's going to require engineering overhead, and I think that separating that out from budget proposals, or what I would consider kind of request for funds, I think that it being its own category would keep it pretty clean.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That way we could have almost templated things for each of those for people to work off of.
Yeah, it just seems like that would help the review process a lot too.
Yes, easier criteria to judge from, easier to glean the information based off of how the templates work. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, and then we have proposals that are about using the budget. So those are, what are the subcategories around ones about using it? So, I mean, clearly there are Treasury ones about investments and about using the Treasury for things like mstable or for ETH staking and the like. We have a budget process that may change as the organizational structure changes. But are there any other kinds under that in terms of access to the treasury?
I would say that you have, like the labs budget, but in Matt's latest version of his budget proposal, that might be deemed unnecessary. Thinking about new teams being spun up, where we're going to vote to fund a new team led by like a director type of role. But even that is superseded by KIP. So
yeah, just to reiterate, I think you're making a good distinction between budget proposals, like long-standing budget proposals, and then like one-time use of funds. So like labs budget should be paid over 12 months versus a one-time grant, both using treasury funds, but definitely a difference in proposal.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, and this, I guess this is more of a long-term question, but there's sort of a template in a lot of other DAOs where if you have a protocol, as the protocol is developed, it's developed by their version of labs, and then the protocol is then released for governance around parameters and maybe upgrades to the community. And I know we didn't exactly work that way, but it was mentioned in terms of the coordination game that maybe some of the parameters would be tuned going forward by governance. So it seems like a protocol template would be helpful, or is that premature?
I mean, probably premature, but I mean, in time, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. We can back burner that one. Okay. Oh God, there was an integration product protocol budget. And what about the kinds of proposals in terms of time? So we right now have the KIP process, which is sort of expensive in terms of time. What I know Matt has mentioned several times, it'd be really helpful to him to have proposals that can be fast tracked.
Yeah, I would almost say things like an emergency governance system is going to be imperative to have. Like something that gives, if you think about what authorities it would need to have.
Yeah.
Authorities like stopping contracts or pulling our funds from somewhere that's the multi-sig without governance approval.
Yeah.
Or intentional changes that need to be made to certain things.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if we need just an emergency one. Like, it seems like a lot of the governance, it goes into a black hole and you never know when it's going to finally come out. So like mandatory deadlines, even if it's like, it will be reviewed and, feedback and start voting or whatever within 2 weeks of, submitting it or something. Cause it just seems like no one ever knows when it'll move forward.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was thinking the other night, maybe like adding a progress bar and like a status hub and stuff could definitely like ease people's minds. So we add like, so far on review, pending, or, missing details, or just like little updates about each proposal. That way both the authors and the community are aware of where the proposal stands. I think that could be really helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't think it takes long to build something like that, even if it's just something as simple as like a Notion or a Trello board or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking on Notion. It doesn't need to be like a coded tool.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, you have this Maker portal, right, which is kind of the gold standard there, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it's even that great, but even just having something in Notion, it could be tremendously more transparent than what we currently have, which is nothing.
And then also back to the point about like fast tracking stuff. I will bring up that graphic, that nouns graphic. You could just scroll up. It's somewhere in the voice chat. But basically anything below a certain threshold. So like if it's under, let's just call an arbitrary number. Let's just say it's like under 20 ETH. Then anything under 20 ETH doesn't need the entire consent of the Rook holders. It just needs a maybe a grant committee or something like that. And then even smaller than that, so let's say maybe under 5 ETH or under 4 ETH can be divvied out by like a single person from labs or something. So I think it should be the amount of friction that you need with a proposal should be proportional to the funds.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any expectation that we're going to have something more active in terms of community grants?
Yes, but I think we were talking about this yesterday, but I think it requires a buy-in from like a lot of people at labs to facilitate it, and it might even be more work for some people, like to figure out what needs to get done and stuff. And I don't know. I feel like we're staffed pretty well at labs. Like the culture at Rook seems to be when there is a need to staff it, rather than trying to, just pull a task ad hoc. So I don't know. I'm not that up to date on stuff that's going on product or engineering. Those where I'd think a lot of the meaty grants come in from, and I'm just not up to date. So.
Yeah, I do think there's a need for like a grant program, and so also if you take like the TWAM guys for instance, right? In a way, we want kind of like this magnet somewhere on our boards that says that if you're working on a really interesting problem and it's kind of related to math or whatever, that we have these grants that you can apply for, right? Which we currently don't have. And there might be some other really interesting projects that are working on something and could really use that, and we could really use them. So there's really nothing that signals like our intent to collaborate currently. So yeah, there will be a grant program for sure.
Can you give an example? Of like a time, yeah.
Like the TWAM guys is probably a good example, right? We found them, right? But in another years, they could have found us by having this grant program that outlines that they could have applied to us as well, for instance.
Do you mean like, are you talking about like a formal grant application program, something like Uniswap or some of the other big DAOs like Aave, and I think Aave has one. I know Uniswap has one, but basically like an application form you fill out, you meet with the committee, like something like that process.
I mean, it could very well be, right. I personally haven't done enough research. I haven't thought enough about it, but right now there's nothing.
I think the idea, so just like to quickly go over, I think my understanding of Uniswap's grant program is it's kind of like a sub DAO of Uniswap. It's a different multisig that executes a grant budget. Wait, no, I could totally be wrong. I'm actually not sure about that. But that's how we could do it in Rook, right? Like we could have a separate multisig, maybe a more active multisig group that issues grants and maybe like by majority vote. So it could even be like if it's 3 out of 5 of the multisig, 3 out of 5 of the group has to approve a grant or something like that.
Who would oversee the effectiveness of that grant program and that multisig?
Well, I mean, it could be reviewed pretty often. So like
But by
it
who?
could be reviewed.
By the DAO or like by labs, or what do you think?
Either both. I mean, like if people are thinking that it's bad, like we could do a small trial period, right? And if people think that the grant committee is issuing good grants, then either we give them a larger budget or we continue on with the trial. I don't know. I just don't think that there's going to be. I don't plan on, because again, if it's a large enough proposal, it has to go through the KIP anyway. So, like, worst comes to worst, we just burn, like, 20 ETH or 30 ETH in grants. That's absolute worst case scenario. I just think if you start small and see the effectiveness of it, you could just branch there, and I don't know. I'm not super worried about oversight with such a small amount of money. I do think there should be oversight. It's not that I don't think there should be, but like, all the grants will be transparent. They'll all be announced. Like, if someone gets funded, it'll be clear who's getting funded and for why.
Yeah, I've seen a number of projects that split things out in this way. So they'll have a community managed fund for the kinds of grants that Synth is talking about, where people do things like they become community ambassadors, or they'll work on a staking program proposal, or they'll work on something that is about building the community and building the ecosystem. Whereas the larger grants, like the TWAM one, will go through either a larger dev grant program or the traditional governance program.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with TWAM having to go through a proposal. Like,
No,
I
it
don't know.
should.
Yeah, like, I know you think, Tommy, that maybe, like, had they known about it, but I think as long as we're making, like, our proposal process clearer, it could have helped the TWAM guys out as well, or someone like them. I think it's just about making, like, if you want to work on the Rook ecosystem, or you have an idea, like, what bucket does your idea fall under, right? Like the nouns infographic I shared. Do you have to go through the full process? Like, letting people know where they need to get started, I think is helpful.
Yeah. And it does seem like if they're going to work on the protocol or products, they should definitely be overseen by people from that side of Rook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could even talk about breaking it into, like, even smaller pools, right? Then there's, like, an engineering grant budget, then there's a community grant budget, and so on. That's an option as well.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So Wes, I apologize. I have to apologize publicly to Wes. We were supposed to talk about these things, and I never followed up with you. So sorry about that. But maybe we can talk later. What's that?
Said boo, Jason.
I know. Shame. Yeah. So maybe we'll talk later this week about starting to build out some frameworks for some of these proposals, and then we can throw them into Google Docs for everybody to respond to.
Yeah, looking forward to collaborating with you.
Yeah, likewise. I think it'd be good. Okay, because I feel like at this point it would be helpful just maybe to have some stuff down on paper that people can reply to. All right, and then the last thing I had on the schedule was looking ahead. So we've talked in the past, and Hazard has agreed to come and talk about the beige paper, and I feel like some of the things we're touching on now in terms of, timing within the process and expectations within the process, we're now to a point where we would really benefit from going back and looking at the beige paper and looking at sort of first principles and where we're trying to go, and then starting to address things like SOFONs and accountability for them, and whether we have the right structure. Well, I mean, what structure to move toward would be a natural next step. So yeah, my takeaway from that is I'm going to talk to Hazard and see if he can join us next week or the week after or sometime soon. I think. Is there anything else sort of hanging out there? Or are we in the land of Dietz bingo? We might be.
I would just remind everybody to go vote if you
Yes.
haven't yet. Think about your questions for Guard and his AMA tomorrow.
Yes.
Talking about legal stuff. I think that's going to be an exciting talk. Hopefully people come and take advantage of it. I don't think that getting this advice for free is something that should be taken lightly.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, on the events AMA with Guard, I posted just like a working question document. So if you have any thoughts and questions, just click on the event, and then there should be a Google Doc that everyone can look at and post your questions to, and look at other questions, and maybe that'll spur a question of your own.
Great. Oh, and just one thing, I should have mentioned this earlier. A lot of this impetus toward these templates came from a conversation with Guard. So he was very clear about this idea that, when we create a KIP, we create an accountability to the community. And so the clearer we can be about what goes into a KIP and what doesn't, the better it will be for us long term. So I wanted to give him certainly credit for that. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.